Good morning, everyone. In my hands, I have a Guinness-themed mug that I bought in Dublin in 20. It contains a drink that I'm going to offer you all a mug of too. However, I'm legally obliged to tell you that it will likely give you stunted appetite and digestive problems. It's even been increasingly linked to breast cancer, gastrointestinal diseases, and cardiovascular events. Drink too much of it, and it can age your brain by 6.5 years. And the International Agency for Research on Cancer outright flatly calls it a carcinogen. So, would you drink that drink? Well, I have to contend with the fact that at the moment I am drinking that particular potion, not because it's literally inside this Guinness mug, but because the drink is shift work. And that potent cocktail of 24-hour working is the beating heart of my police research, which asks, to what extent does the impact of shift working inhibit the output and performance of UK police officers? So hold on to your custodians. Next slide for me, please. As Gailey summarised in 1994, shift work is a necessity which law enforcement will have to deal with until there is no longer a need for law enforcement. So if we cannot remove shift work, then we have to wrestle with the consequences of it. And my literature review certainly highlighted some sharp-edge risks. Take just two examples. Williamson and Fayer found that going 17 to 19 consecutive hours without sleep atrophied driving performance to a level almost equivalent to the UK drink drive limit, while a situational shoot-don't-shoot analysis by Blake and Camella found that night shifts and insufficient sleep degraded the decision-making processes and reaction times of firearms officers. The moral of the story is that any variable that negatively impacts police performance risks more than red ink in spreadsheets, but potentially blood on hands, and of course, devastating blows to public trust and confidence. Next slide. Now, that concerning backdrop is where your humble PC 944 plotted up against, and I garnered secondary data using a systemized keyword search. The result? 10 peer-reviewed academic products from the last 8 years, which cumulatively surveyed 1,060 serving UK officers, 98 Irish officers, and 46 newly resigned England-based cops. Next slide, please. And another. Wonderful. And across the findings, 4 key findings were identified across the various studies. Firstly, multiple studies highlighted shift work's grim impact on the physical and mental health of officers. Burnett, Sheard and St Clair Thompson found that 87.8% of their participants experienced a decline in their mental health since joining the job, while Alan, Safi and Deb found that 20.5% of their surveyed officers were obese, and that the number of overweight officers more than doubled those with a healthy body mass index. Now, of course, the usual caveats surrounding BMI apply, but 94% of the officers cited shift work as having contributed to them having a poor diet, which raises questions about the physical capacity of the average British bobby, regardless. Secondly, shift work's rampant effect on officer sleep pervaded the studies. Sharma and others found that 70% of their participants exhibited poor sleep regardless of what shift pattern you put them on. And qualitative research showed one officer putting forward the point with painful directness, stating, "The shift pattern affects my ability to sleep, which in turn affects my mental health." Dr. Yvonne Taylor sophisticated a number of these points in her book chapter, which argued that the lack of research into the consequences of this widespread fatigue, particularly with respect to Pollack's, bordered on wantonness from forces. The next animation, please. Thirdly, an unexpected performance indicator was the impact of shift work on officer resignations. Charman and Bennett's research on the aforementioned 46 newly resigned officers found that 30.4% of their exits attributed the shift pattern as having had a major effect, which is a notable prevalence. One officer also specifically held the shift pattern responsible for years and years of depression, an alarming statement. The implication is that shift work's performance impacts can have consequences at both an organisational as well as personal level in respect to accelerated turnover. And the fourth animation, please. The final finding, and perhaps the weightiest, was that research that followed that cause and effect chain all the way from shift-related impacts to performance implications were very rare. Dr. Taylor was once again an outlier in this respect, with her use of cognition tests to study fatigue and performance implications in tandem. However, anomalous findings such as officer reaction times actually going up during night shifts actually served more to underline the survey's limitations, such as sample size and learning effects. But note too the findings of James and Hesketh, whose trialling of fatigue management training brought about a 25-minute increase in officer sleep and decreased the likelihood of officers falling asleep behind the wheel. Next slide, please. Therefore, be it poor diet, resignation, drowsy driving, and insufficient sleep, the 10 papers offer different angles of the same perspective. Policing takes its toll. Now, there's no surprises there, but the challenge of my research question was assessing the extent to which shift work is the culpable variable, or the prime suspect. Now, risk assessing the effects of fatigue shift workers is a well-trodden path in the healthcare industry, as well as international policing, but not so much on British shores, where Dr. Taylor remains an outlier. Other studies, for the most part, simply re-articulate the issue. Yet, in the context of Oscar Kilo highlighting greater fatigue, work overload, and intention to quit amongst shift working cops, the complexity of the issue does not undercut its worth. It is arguable that British society may have to reckon with the fact that those charged to serve and protect them are being found to be increasingly fallible. In other words, there is a tension between how error-free the public expects the police to be and how error-prone shift work might make them. These are extremely sensitive discussion points that a humble dissertation, complete with limitations, can only aspire to rub up against, but their background present in any such discussion of British policing is unmistakable. Next slide, please. Now, interesting though that might be, as my Nan Tong once said, if you're going to moan about something, do something about it. And across my research project, I propounded 9 specific and pointed recommendations. Here's a free sample of 3. Firstly, institutionalised sleep hygiene training. The aforementioned findings of James and Hesketh have thrown down the gauntlet. Forces should trial sleep hygiene training, utilising existing products such as Oscar Kilo's Better Sleep Toolkit, so that sleep-related matters play a larger role in existing officer welfare strategies. This is going to be key, particularly in terms of advertising the secondary benefits of sleep for officers' physical and mental health, as well as energy and mood levels. 2 is to implement long evidence solutions from other industries. In-trial solutions should piggyback off the existing findings in the healthcare industry, such as light glasses and relaxation rooms. There is a dearth of quantitative and solutions-based research in the context of British policing, and if we don't trial these solutions that have already been successful elsewhere, we won't know if they are applicable and transferable to a British bobby. And thirdly, to revise authorised professional practice and police roadcraft literature. The mantra of this literature is that police driving ought to be exemplary. Here. Reference too is made to the fact that self-assessing one's own fitness to drive is the most important part of vehicle tasking. Here. However, its idealism borders on a lack of realism. As Dr. Taylor stated in her stinging attack on the guidance, there is a lack of acknowledgement for the prevailing research on shift work's effects when compared to the Highway Code's robust expectations of tired drivers. Next slide, please. And breathe. British policing literally cannot function without shift work. And the aim of my research was to establish the extent to which it degrades output and performance. It became very clear that shift work negatively affects officers' physical and mental health, as well as encouraging some to leave the profession entirely. Though it was persistently complicated to link shift-related impacts to material consequences for output, the fact that it affects performance to any extent requires further investigation from UK police forces. Otherwise, it is public trust and confidence that stands to suffer. After all, it seems safe to assert that the British public would be perturbed by what shift work materially means for those charged to protect them. Sleepier, unhealthier, slower, and more error-prone. It's arguable, therefore, that the Peelian maxim that the public are the police and the police are the public is less apt than simply saying that both are human beings, fundamentally fallible and hostage to their circumstances, a not so un-Peelian thought. So, the further lines of inquiry are there to grab, and an effective partnership between police and academics means that a positive outcome can be secured with conviction. But in the meantime, it makes me wonder what the British public would say if you were to ask them, would you drink that drink? Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much, Kobe. Again, just waiting for the Q&A just to see if there are any questions that come in. So just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so we have had a question from Matt. So what would be your top 2 or 3 asks of Cambridgeshire to help with this, Kobe?
I think recently we've experienced a great uplift in officer welfare strategies. I think the key is to bake sleep hygiene training into that because it connects to so many other facets of welfare, such as physical and mental health, etc. So it would be good in supervisor one-on-ones for in any such pro forma for sleep and shift related questions to be baked into them. I also think there's potentially room for fitness to drive self-assessment, either to be conducted by officers during shift or supervisors as well. And there are great resources out there. The Oscar Kilo sleep toolkit is fantastic, but we don't want to have an after the fact approach with it. If something terrible happens with an officer crashing on their drive home, or we think a mistake at work happens because of fatigue, for us to point to this fantastic document after the fact. Constabularies, Cambridgeshire or otherwise, need to show the effort and the desire to really implement that into the policies that no doubt already exist, but to basically make sleep a better focus.
Okay, thank you. Question from Jay. What can be done to improve police nutrition whilst on night shifts?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a lot of the responsibility may still lie with the individual officers. I think again, it would be good for better nutrition advice to be baked into training and policies, yes, but we have also got to encourage the right culture amongst the officers themselves. I know a lot of stations in Cambridgeshire have tuck shops. For which the options are not necessarily conducive with healthy lifestyle. It would be interesting, and this is just come to me, whether the constabularies could play a larger role in that. Certainly in Cambridgeshire, there's one in each station in terms of having healthier foods there. Or I know we can sometimes work with local vendors in terms of potentially discounts or vouchers for healthy food options. And making sure the gyms in stations are utilised, advertised, and championed as well.
Fabulous, thank you. Just want to get this last question on in quickly because I think this is important. So this is from Helen. Do you think that this is exacerbated by a collective mindset that night shifts are terrible / awful, or is there no evidence of this?
A collective in terms of police officers think they're terrible, or as in researchers think that that's terrible? Sorry if there's not a quick way to ask that, but I want to make sure I answer it well.
She hasn't specified.
No worries. I mean, yeah, in terms of what I say at the start, in terms of the Guinness mug, like there is a lorry load of research, if you want to wade into it, about the negative health of night shifts. The way I like to think about it in terms of our attitude towards it is that risk in policing is like walking a razor edge, in that the very slightest thing done wrong can lead to drastic consequences. But I like to think that the meaning can be reversed, in that if we make very small changes to make things better, it can go the other way and we can get better results that we might not have done otherwise. So we have to deal with night shifts, but let's go into it with our eyes open in terms of what they mean for us and others. Make positive incremental changes, because even making the 1% better, be it our attitude or otherwise, could make big changes out in the streets.
Hey, thank you very much for that.